Greetings, everyone. Thank you so much for coming on. We only have about an hour, so we are going to get started very quickly. My name is Ashanti McGee. I am the Grant and Access Manager for WESTAF. I use she, they pronouns, and I am located in the Western Shoshone, Southern Paiute area, also known as Las Vegas, Nevada. And I'm going to hand it over to Marcelina to share more. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. We're going to blaze through the WESTAF introduction so we can get to our guest speakers. I am Marcelina Ramirez. I am located in Colorado Springs, Colorado, and I am a mixed race Indigenous Latina, working as a program coordinator here at the GAP coordinator here at WESTAF. On the screen, you will see the rest of our staff: Anita Tsney, who's our director of GAP, Josh Ellis, who's our grants and inclusion manager, and C.R. Scott, who is our grant specialist. Today, our guest speakers are James Woodenlegs and Terry Vinson, and they will introduce themselves shortly. We're going to go through our shared commitments here at WESTAF. We value humility, learning from our mistakes, and asking questions to gain deeper understanding. We feel empowered to hold one another accountable, establish boundaries, and ask each other for help. We lean into discomfort by facing challenges and conflict with openness and grace. We stay present by listening actively, being mindful of body language, and participating to the fullest of our ability. We share from our own experiences and grow as a team through the inclusion of every individual voice. We prioritize accessibility and are mindful of our language and ensuring belonging for all. Please keep your microphone muted when not speaking. It is in the far left corner. Please rename yourself to your first and last name and your state/jurisdiction acronym. Click on Participants, hover over your name, and click the More button to change. To ask questions or make comments, please use the raise hand function at the end during the Q&A section. You may write your questions in the chat at any time, and those will be monitored throughout. Click on Reactions in the middle of your screen and choose Raised Hand, or click on the chat in the middle of your screen to write your question or comment. Live transcripts, closed captions are turned on. You can view or hide them, change the size, as well as other functions by using the up arrow on live transcript, which is either in the middle of your screen or behind the More button with the 3 dots on the right side of your screen. Today's session outline. Now that we've had our welcome, we're going to pass it to James Woodenlegs for a blessing. Then we will move to shared commitment. Oh, we already did this, excuse me. So sorry, the blessing will come in just a moment, but now that we're going through our session outline, we'll move to collective space. Then we will pass it to James Woodenlegs and Terry Vinson, and then a Q&A at the end. For accessibility needs, if you do have an immediate question, please feel free to put that in the chat and we will answer it promptly. We're going to quickly honor our collective space. What do you want to acknowledge in this space today? Who would you like to honor in this space today? What do you need in this space today? What will help you be fully present today? And how can we support you today? Please feel free to put that in the chat at any time. And now I will pass it to our guest speakers. James Woodenlegs, we'd be honored for you to take it away, and I'll stop sharing my screen.
From the South, we focus on the children. In the West, focus on couples, adults, and those who are married. On the North, focus on the elders, our grandparents and ancestors. We thank Mother Earth below. We thank Father Sky above. Great Spirit, thank you for watching over us. Thank you for working with us. Thank you for allowing us to come together. And I ask you to allow us to open our hearts and our minds and to collaborate and work together. Allow us to be open. Blessings and thank you. First, east direction for new life as well. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that, James Wooden Legs. I'd like to take this time to acknowledge the traditional owners and ancestors of the tribal lands of Oge Po Awinge, here where I reside in Santa Fe, New Mexico. And thank you for that beautiful blessing. Kia ora tātou, ko Elena tuku ingoa, ko Aotearoa aho. My name is Elena Higgins. I'm of Samoan and Māori descent from the waters of Aotearoa, New Zealand. I'm the co-founder and executive director of the nonprofit IndigenousWays. I'm honored to be the moderator of this 60-minute presentation. I have black curly hair, shoulder length, brown skin, wearing brown rimmed glasses, and my top is white with specklings of brown, dark, and light. So I'd like to welcome each and every one of you to this panel session of Native, Deaf, Handtalk, and ASL, which is an introduction into many worlds. Thank you, WESTAF, especially Ashanti, Marcelina, who have been instrumental in making this presentation possible. The structure of this fabulous session is having 4 panelists who will share their experience and insights addressing the topic. And then afterwards, there will be a video of 1.5 minutes of deaf-friendly, and then we're going to open it up to Q&A. So during this session, if you've got any questions or you've been moved, please feel free to put that in the chat box. And when the video has finished, we will open that up for anyone who wishes to specifically address James Wooden Legs, who you just saw, Terry Vinson, and any one of the panelists. So, in saying that, I'd like to introduce our first panelist, who you've just met, James Wooden Legs, who is deaf, Northern Cheyenne. He was born in Lame Deer, Montana, to a family and culture that utilizes Indian Sign Language and Cheyenne language. James Wooden Legs is fluent in both Indian Plains and American Sign Language that some of us know as ASL. His journey has been inspirational to many deaf and hearing individuals, and he has been given his Indian name of Morning Star. So in saying that, we'd like to welcome James Wooden Legs, who is just going to be starting his video. And thank you, JWL.
This is James Wooden Legs speaking. Hello, everyone. I'll introduce myself. My name is James Wooden Legs. I am a member, an enrolled member of the Northern Cheyenne, and this is the sign for Cheyenne here, peoples from Lame Deer, Montana. I am a deaf individual. I am Native. I am also an elder, and I serve as a spiritual counselor. I speak Indian Sign Language. When I was born, I had spinal meningitis. That made me become deaf. Sign language is my first language from birth. People in my neighborhood, people around me when I was growing up, spoke also sign language. My entire years growing up, I spoke sign language. When I was 8 years old, a social worker came and took me. They took me to a deaf school. The deaf school, or a school for the deaf and blind to be more specific, and this school was located in Great Falls, Montana. When I was there, the sign language they used was different. It surprised me and shocked me. I was used to ISL, Indian Sign Language, which is different than American Sign Language. My time there, I was told I couldn't use my sign language. I had to use their sign language. Like, for example, during holidays when I would go home, I couldn't even go because it was cold or there was snow. And that would be like starting around Thanksgiving. During Christmas, I also couldn't go home because the snow was so heavy. In the spring for Easter, when I was really excited to go home, there was still too much snow and I couldn't go home. It was 9 months of American Sign Language that I had from first starting there, which means I forgot my Indian Sign Language. I was so excited the first time I got to go back home. I started moving my hands to talk to everyone, and my mother said, "No, that's not Indian Sign Language. We speak Indian Sign Language here." That was the first time I realized I needed to practice and be familiar and be able to use both sign languages, both ASL and ISL. And I started practicing from that point forward. I grew up on the res. What does that mean? That means that I attended many powwows. I saw Indian Sign Language being used there. There's a hand game, a sign hand game that exists too. I saw that there too. NAC, the Native American Church, they use sign language. Gatherings to play billiards, to play pool, they use sign language. The rodeo, went to the rodeo, sign language was there. I was also a firefighter. When I got to the team there, the firefighter team, they all used sign language. There wasn't walkie-talkies, but there was sign language. Gatherings on Friday night for elders, elder socials, I would show up. Everyone used sign language. It was amazing. I had access to my community and I had communication with my community. I'd like to tell you a story. Deaf Indians, deaf, blind, deaf, so on and so on. There is a whole spectrum for deaf, blind, and for deaf individuals. There are different ranges of hearing problems. When one is deaf blind, there are different types of deaf blindness. And like, for example, Usher syndrome. And this is the same for both deaf blind or deaf. Many times when I go places, communication is lacking and I don't understand things. However, sometimes I will notice sign language. through an interpreter. When that happens, I'd say, go up to the interpreter and say, hey, I need to know what's going on. I can access communication through you. Let me know. And then when I see communication happen, those barriers are reduced and I can understand. There are barriers that still exist today that must be torn down. I understand both the deaf and the deaf blind, and I understand that both types of individuals have skills and talent. When there is spoken language, we need to bring an interpreter so that there is visual language so that we can have communication. Some people will say things like, well, I never learned that, or the school never told me. Well, those can be systemic barriers and they get in the way of communication. The goal is for folks to be able to share their stories with each other, to communicate, for self-development, for internal growth. When it comes to indigenous music, I am not a big fan of music. I should say I was not a big fan of music until IndigenousWays brought in interpreters. And then I realized, wow, what an impact. It impacted my soul to be able to understand what music was about. Now I like music, but I have to access it through a sign language interpreter. Those that are deaf and those that are deaf blind can do this. We want more interpreter services for Indigenous events. I want more understanding. I want more knowledge. And there's a quote that I like to say, and that quote is, don't leave us behind. No more. Indian Sign Language, some of it has been preserved by rock carvings. When we look at the rock carvings that exist, some of those have Indian Sign Language. For example, a popular one is there's a shape that looks like a torso, and it's got a line through the torso. That emulates the sign for hunger, which is Indian Sign Language. And there are many of these rock carvings that exist that are sign language, and they need to be studied. I am very grateful for IndigenousWays. We have to serve as warriors for the education of our children. Children should not be left behind anymore or at all. Thank you.
Thank you, James Woodenlegs, for that powerful presentation and words from your experience for all of us. It is now my pleasure to introduce our next panelist, Terry Vinson, who is deaf, Aztec, French, and Comanche. She graduated from the College of Santa Fe with a Bachelor of Education. Terry has taught American Sign Language, ASL, at the Santa Fe Community College for over 26 years. So let's give it up for the beautiful TV.
This is Terry speaking. Hello, everyone. I too will introduce myself. My name is Terry Vinson. My name in sign language is TV, Terry Vinson. I am Comanche, Aztec, French as well. I'm also an elder. And I'd like to share something with you about my experiences growing up. I became deaf when I was 3 years old. I had a very high fever. And I also went to a deaf school when I was 3 years old. And that's the New Mexico School for the Deaf. That school is located in Santa Fe. I arrived at the school and I saw many girls and kids using sign language. I was so excited to learn sign language. Later on, my teacher told my mother, "Your daughter can't talk." My mother said, "Okay, So my mother decided to teach me how to enunciate and pronounce words correctly. I am profoundly deaf. So for me, access to communication has been critical. Why? Because my hands, my face, and the expressions I make, along with my body language, is part of my communication. Later on, my mother and I, we had a poor connection. And the reason for this is because there was a lack of communication between us. My life path took me deeper into the deaf community. And I spent more time with the deaf community because of communication and sign language. I'm an educator. I work in education as a teacher. I'm a teacher of American Sign Language, which is commonly known as ASL. It stands for American Sign Language, ASL. Now, I need to let you know, I love teaching hearing people American Sign Language to sign. My goal is to develop and create a bridge where those who can hear and those who communicate by sight are able to cross the bridge and interact with each other. I don't just want to do that here. I want to do that for the entire nation, across the USA. There's a reason for it. 97% of hearing parents, those who can hear and speak, have children that are deaf. Or the children that are deaf have 97% parents that can hear. And quite often, they don't want to learn sign language. They want their children to be able to speak. How do they do this? Through a device called the cochlear implant. It's an implant that goes behind their ear in an effort to have their children hear so that they can speak to their parents. Now, it's true, with the cochlear implant, you can hear. However, only some deaf children can speak and others can't, despite having a cochlear implant. This is why it's important to create that bridge. Sometimes when deaf children go home from school, there's no communication at home. So it's a traumatic experience for them to be at home and not have access to communication to their own families, to their own parents. That is a highly traumatic experience. And I want to share with you how to formalize protocols for the deaf protocols. Number one, deaf people rely heavily on eye contact. If you see me, I am tracking the interpreter as his mouth moves so I can make sure that he's following everything I'm saying. Eye contact, number one protocol in our community. Deaf people need to have eye contact. And at the same time, our eyes move about. Why? For peripheral waves and hellos. Now, I'm not trying to brag, but I should warn you, deaf people, we have eagle eyes. We have some sharp vision. The difference is hearing people rely on their ears for environmental cues. They hear when something's around them. Deaf people, we don't have that. We need to see everything around us. We have heightened vision. Protocol number two, deaf people are very blunt. Deaf people might see a friend walk by and say, "Oh, how are you doing? You look so fat. What happened?" And that friend might say, "Yeah, you're right. I've been eating more. It obviously shows on me." And they might respond with, "And you're so skinny. How do you do that? And how do you keep your hair so pretty?" Those are the types of very honest conversations that the deaf community can have. Whereas we know in the culture, for those who hear, that's not acceptable. Hearing people are more vague when they greet and meet each other, and they're not as specific or blunt. In the deaf community, a hand wave gets our attention, and that's who we look at to communicate. If someone's closer, they can tap on our shoulder for our attention. If you live on a house with a raised wooden floor, a deaf person will stomp on the floor to get someone's attention. Or they're sitting on a table, a deaf person will stomp at the table to generate vibrations to get someone to look and catch their attention. Another protocol, we will flash the lights on and off in the room in order to get attention. When it's a crowd of people together, hearing or deaf people, typically someone will say, excuse me, they'll tap you on the shoulder, say, excuse me, I got to get by because it's a crowd. That's fine. When hearing people are in a crowd together, they won't walk in front of each other. They'll walk behind and around each other. For some reason, they treat those who are signing differently and show more respect, and the deaf just walk right through it. So there is a difference there. Okay, another protocol. I have an iPhone. When I set my alarm, I don't hear it. If you're hearing, you can hear your alarm, right? Our phones have a flashing light. When somebody calls, we see the flashing light, and then we know that we need to answer the call. And we do that via something called the video phone. It'll have a flashing light on it, and then I know to answer. And for example, on a video phone, an interpreter will show up just like we see now. And that interpreter will hear the voice of the caller. And it'll go something like, hi. The interpreter will say hi, right? And I will sign something like, who is this on the phone? And then the interpreter will say that. And then the person on the phone will say, this is mom. And then I'll say, oh, hi, mom. And for example, that's how a video phone call works. It's very similar to what we're in. Other devices that we have, our doorbells connect to flashing lights. So when someone shows up to my house and rings my doorbell, lights flash, and I know to answer the doorbell. Now I'm gonna go off on a tangent. For those, well, when I didn't have a flashing doorbell, I had a cat. And if somebody knocked on the door, my cat would run to the door and look up at the door, and I would know who's here. And that's actually the case now because I don't have a flasher at the moment right now. So it's very interesting that I'm able to use my pet cat, to help me let me know when there's someone at the door like this. I also want to tell you about American Sign Language and teaching and participants. When I compare hearing people, right, they clap like this with their hands. Deaf people clap like this with their hands. When I compare both, I see the difference there. What's popular and what's common is a sign called the ILY sign, and that stands for I love you. You know how there's stamps? There was a stamp where there was a picture of a mother and her baby, and she was holding the I love you sign to the baby. That's been a stamp as well. What's really interesting is that deaf people tend to do things like, hey, hi, it's been so long. Let's hug. And then when we're done, we say, okay, it's time to go home. Hearing people, it can be different. They might check in, say, hi, how are you doing? We'll see you later. So it's interesting, the difference. And deaf people will often say, take care, see you later, goodbye, and have really long goodbyes. And I'd say it's important to be receptive not only with your eyes, but with your heart as well when around deaf people. When I'm around hearing people, I understand that it's not just about being receptive to their sounds, but to also open up my heart and being receptive to them as persons as well. Thank you so much. Yay.
Thank you so much, Siri, and sharing your experiences and insights is so, so valuable. Thank you. So
Very
our next
definitely. Love to everyone.
So our next person on the panel that we have is Tash Terry, who is Danae. She wears many hats, including being the co-founder and artist director of IndigenousWays. She is also a nationally certified American Sign Language interpreter and is half of the multi-award winning musical duo IndigFep. And with that, let's give it up for Tash Terry.
Hey everyone, thank you very much. And I would like to introduce myself in Navajo. And Yat et anotro, a head consi kai anotro, she tash terry in a she, to the cheating in shlon, Bilagana bushish chin, she chet cheating in le, she kate ayes and low, zittle sado, zittle jean de, not ani ne, she dish chin, a kut ow a sta nishle. And for everyone's information, that's basically a hello in Navajo. And what I said is, hello, everybody. My name is Tosh. I was born to the Bitterwater clan made by the French and Irish. And my grandfather comes from the red streak running into the water. My traditional people come from Big Mountain and Black Mountain, from the four corners of the Navajo Nation on the Arizona side. I was born in Shiprock, New Mexico, on the other side of the four corners. And that's how I am a woman today. I want to thank you all, Ashanti and your team, WESTAF, for supporting marginalized communities to share their beauty and the gifts and to teach everyone the beauty way, the hajon, the balance of life. I am multicultural and was born and raised on a reservation and came into a deaf family, Navajo, when I was 11, 12 years old. And I learned a lot from that family, and they introduced me to other deaf people. And they taught me at a very young, impressionable age, the beauty of three-dimensional communication. I just absolutely was fascinated. I took to it, and I was a very good student because I listened. I listened with my eyes and I listened with my heart. And they taught me how to do that. I also got to see the challenges they had. I was already immersed in our own challenges on the reservation with the impacts of colonization, but I got to see my deaf family, who I will say they adopted me. I saw their struggles. They were doubly, triply, quadruply left out. And they had absolutely no access. There was no such thing as ADA back in the early 80s. And there certainly isn't any today either. So that is still the problem. So today, as a nonprofit co-founder from Indigenous Roots, I absolutely want to hear and see and continue to learn from our Indigenous deaf brothers and sisters of all generations, to be on the platform, to be on the stage, to be selling their art, to be teaching their art, to be teaching their perspective, to be teaching their language, and most of all, to teach us that deafness is a spectrum also, and there's many different ways of deafness, from slight hard of hearing to late deafened to profoundly deaf to pro-capital D deaf culture, the small d mainstream. All of this stuff is all foreign, but in the deaf culture, it's their way. And for me, the most important thing I learned is I have a culture. Actually, I have more than one culture, but I am not the deaf culture. What I am is a visitor. So as a visitor, I have to heed to what that deaf person tells me. If I'm interpreting for a deaf child and they tell me how to sign a sign, I need to follow that sign and respect that deaf child. If an elder tells me a sign to sign something that's no longer being used, as an interpreter, I have to use that sign for the remainder of that job, because it's all about respect. It's not about stepping into anybody's culture, cultural appropriation, becoming a master of a teacher of sign language. It's not about any of that. It's about staying humble, staying respectful, staying honorable to the deaf, to learn that, you know what? I was invited to a culture that has three-dimensional communication. They don't rely on sound, and they taught me. So I'm going to go through my life and continue to respect them. So if anybody ever asks me to teach them anything, I refer them to a deaf person. And that's why we brought these two beautiful grassroots Indigenous individuals to you today, is to tell you that there's some beautiful people out there that can teach us hearing people in the mainstream culture of hearing world. And one last thing I'll say is, as hearing people, there's hearing people that are called codas. A lot of you probably have heard this and may have even seen the movie Coda. The acronym stands for Children of Deaf Adults. Children of deaf adults, they pop out hearing and they learn the sign language. They learn that I love you in their mommy's arms, in their daddy's arms. And those children grow up immersed in this culture and they go out into the hearing world. And that's a whole nother journey you got to talk to a coda about, but I'm not a coda, so I can't tell you that journey. But if anybody gets into the core of the deaf culture, it's the children of deaf adults, because they get it. They really get it. They've seen it. There's also sodas, siblings of deaf adults. There's girlfriend of deaf adult. I mean, there's all kinds of hearing people of deaf adults. And those people, I also have high regard for, because they're way immersed in the culture and live with the deaf people and learn from them. So we want to continue to expand our reach and work with other nonprofits and for-profit organizations to provide this beautiful service that we have today here. I want to thank you, Ashanti and WESTAF, for suggesting this panel discussion today, and I hope we can do more of this. Thank you very much.
Thank you for that, Tash, and your beautiful insights there. For those that have joined, thank you so much. And being here for this extraordinary workshop, Native Deaf Handtalk and ASL. For those that have just joined us, my name is Elena Higgins. I'm the co-founder and also executive director of IndigenousWays. So just summing up before we show you this amazing video, and also inviting Q&A, whether you want to tap that into the chat box or share it on screen. You know, I come from a country, and in 1986, the Maori tribe where I am from wanted the New Zealand government to make the second official language of Maori. That happened. So I was one of the cohort in the third year cohort that went out and taught Maori throughout in the schools. So it meant every school in New Zealand had to teach a percentage or a time of that language. Today, over 30 years long, the Te Reo Māori is so strong. Fast forwarding to 2006, in New Zealand Sign Language became the third official language of Aotearoa New Zealand. What that meant was every school in Aotearoa had to teach a certain amount of language into each of those schools. So today, and the community then of deaf and hard of hearing New Zealanders was 100,000. Why am I sharing this? Because anything and everything is possible. So as IndigenousWays, and Tash shared her story of as an 11-year-old meeting a deaf Navajo, we know that there's over 130 deaf and hard of hearing Navajos on and off the reservation, which also means, because it's sovereign, none of the ADA services.
This is Terry Vinson. Elena, I'm sorry to correct you. That's 4,000, not 130. There's about 4,000 deaf Navajo so far that have been counted. So 4,000, yeah. Some are out of the res, not in the area, but as a total, it's about 4,000, adding up the elders and the youth together. Yeah.
Thank you for that, TV. And excuse me, I was going from,
Sure.
I think it was 2008 where we were doing the research. And so as a result, there's no ADA access on the sovereign nation. So as a nonprofit, which most of us are all involved in and in the leadership, it was what was important to us. So not only as a woman of color, as a lesbian, as Tasha and I know what it's like to be excluded. And so one of the important things was co-founding this nonprofit of exclusion and accessibility. You've already met the beautiful James Woodenlegs and also Terry Vinson, who have been very instrumental in guiding us in how we need to provide the access within our communities. There's never been any money to have those interpreters at the beginning, but the fundamental point for us was how important that was. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to share a video. Am I doing that, Marcelena, or are you doing that?
That would be you, my dear.
Okay, you got it. So I thanks so much for that. So just before we do the Q&A, this is a 1.5 minute video. Chris, if you can interpret this too, that would be cool.
Person says, hello, we're here at the Indigenous Ways Festival. What about this festival is deaf friendly? Well, for one, they support deaf Indigenous artists selling their crafts and beadwork. And they teach and offer classes, workshops for Indian Sign Language as well as American Sign Language. The performances are interpreted, and they have hearing and deaf interpreters on the stage the entire time. Person says, I volunteered and came here to help. And what was amazing is that there was access. I had access to communication here. The person says, the founders of Indigenous Ways speak sign language, and one of them was very involved in the deaf community. The gentleman says they even have an ADA accessible ramp for the stage. And the other person says they hired a deaf filmmaker. And the gentleman says that filmmaker is working on it right now. And this person says, my heart is so happy seeing everyone speaking sign language. I feel like I'm definitely a part of the event. Indigenous Ways gets the check mark. They are deaf friendly.
I just wanted to share that from our recent event that we did in June, the Indigenous Ways Festival. That was our 10th, but the importance of that inclusion. And, you know, as nonprofit organizations, art has been the best modality of that incredible access for changing communities for the better, our societies for the better. So I guess putting it back to you and anything that you saw, or you may have a question for James Woodenlegs or Terry or any of that, this is the time now. I'm just going to take my spotlight off, and also with our beautiful interpreter. If you're feeling a little bit shy and don't want to turn your camera on, dying to have a question, as I said before, bang it in the chat, and the beautiful Sarah will ring that to whoever that may be. Has anyone got any questions, thoughts, opinions, anything like that that you'd like to share in this moment?
Please feel free to also use the chat. We will read from there as well.
All right, if there's no questions or thoughts or anything like that, oh yeah, TV.
TV says, oh, this is Terry Vinson. I had just said, don't be afraid. It's scary for me too to have to answer a question, but feel free to ask away. We can both meet in the middle. I am an educator. I'm a teacher. I know many times the students in the classroom are afraid to express anything, but here today, I welcome it from you.
I guess I will start in saying thank you so much. And was there anything surprising, I'd say for any of you, in starting the work that you're doing to connect with the hearing community and for those hearing individuals who have began to start working with the deaf and hard of hearing community? Anything surprising learning as you've started to learn how to build connections with each other?
This is Tasha's voice. James Woodenlegs and Terry Vinson, when you have your ASL and ISL workshops, you have a lot of deaf and hearing people coming to talk to you, and you also sell your artwork. And you have an ASL interpreter with you as well for the hearing people. Terry and James, do you feel hopeful that your mission is being accomplished? Would you like to answer James Woodenlegs first?
This is James Woodenleg speaking. I'd have to say yes. When I also do the storytelling about Indian Sign Language and there are hearing people around, they gather. Some will tell me, I have a child that's deaf. I didn't know that this existed. That's the type of person I want to make sure they're taught Indian Sign Language first, American Sign Language second. They need to know Handtalk first. Indian Sign Language is key. American Sign Language is also important, but both of those languages will allow them to socialize within their communities, and it'll create a strong bond between the parent and the child, which is what I encourage. I don't want any child to be left behind, just like I wasn't left behind. I was included because there was so much sign language around me. Parents and children should be able to communicate with each other and should be able to spend time together. Therefore, it's very important.
This is Tasha's
This is
voice. Terry, go ahead. Terry, go ahead. Sorry, Terry.
This is Terry speaking. There is an organization called Turtle Island Handtalk. Deaf children can be a part of that. They can include their parents. And there are other deaf indigenous folks that are members there. There are deaf blind, deaf people with other disabilities. And they come from all over the United States, from Canada, and from Mexico. These groups are coming together because we know that we need help for the future. IndigenousWays is a part of that collective and a part of that fabric that has come together to support communities.
Okay, this is Tasha's voice. There's a whole slew of questions. Who wants to read the questions out to Terry and James Woodenlegs?
I can do that.
Okay.
So I have the first one from Anika today. Hi, Anika. I would ask, what is the one takeaway action that you would want all of us to leave with today?
James Woodenlegs speaking. I think a lot of times there's ignorance on both sides or unawareness on both sides. And you start communicating and we realize, wait, you have a soul, I have a soul. And we develop friendships and connect. Divisions shouldn't exist. Connections should exist. We should invite each other to spend time together, to be in each other's presence, to keep the connections between your family and friends strong. Whether you're mostly native, whether you're mostly white, whether you're mostly deaf or mostly hearing, it's important to have that good mix of interactions because that will reduce problems and allow for better community where things can work fine. Terry speaking, if I may add. This is Terry. What I would add, as a teacher with students who learn sign language, some of those students become interpreters, which is pretty amazing for me. It's a compliment to see a person learn sign language and then become an interpreter, especially if they're from the community, because it benefits our community. And then I take that success, their success personally as well, because I know I'm impacting both communities and everyone in our communities. James here with another comment. My people, Indian people, speak Indian languages. That's when you need to use Indian Sign Language. Those that are deaf, that don't hear, don't have speech, but they do have sign language. Some people, we try to communicate and there's difficulty understanding. Sometimes I've been someone that tries to communicate to me writes in Indian language and I can't read that language. This is when we need other indigenous people to learn both sign language, Indian Sign Language and American Sign Language, because they can then facilitate communication between us. Without those interpreter roles, without more hearing people learning both sign languages, then it gets harder to communicate. So we need more individuals to learn sign language. And Americans with Disabilities Act, that law works for the United States, but not anywhere else. It has no bite anywhere else. We need to make laws like that stronger everywhere so more people learn sign language, so there's more communication.
Thank you so much. This is Marcelina. We have one more question, a few more questions in the chat. We'll try to get as many as possible. From Megan Morgan from the California Arts Council. Does the panel have recommendations or specific schools or programs on the best places to start to learn sign language?
James Woodland says, Terry, I'll defer to you on that one. Terry speaking. Okay, that is a good question. Some states provide classes for parents. Another way to learn American Sign Language is by making friends, making deaf friends at the school. If your friends can, you can do that and have them teach you. And also, I do tutoring. I tutor in American Sign Language. I have a relationship with a woman in Hawaii where I'm tutoring her. I also teach and tutor here in the Santa Fe area. I have business cards that I share with people who would like to take tutoring with me. I'm more than happy to help people learn sign language as well. Plus, some of the schools offer sign language classes as well. Sometimes some churches teach sign language. People could learn there. There are also private tutors that exist that one can hire. There are classes online where you can learn sign language from different schools. And so far, that's what I know. This is James. James speaking. For me, James Wooden Legs. What I do is I visit different areas. wherever I might be invited to present and speak, I go there and teach. And at the same time, I try to learn from those areas. To answer the other question, yes, there are different types of Indian Sign Language. So I try to learn from others as much as I try to share mine. Gives me a big motivation to be a lifelong learner and very beneficial.
The, this draws this wonderful
I know you're
session to a
muted.
close.
Oh, there you are. Okay, thank you.
Because we're almost at the top of the hour. I want to thank each and every one of you for blessing us with your time to be here. I'd also the team at WESTAF for making this possible, also making access available, our beautiful interpreter, Crescesiano Garcia. And, we came in with a blessing and we're going to go out with a blessing. And, there's been many questions that weren't answered. And JWL and TV, are you okay if I ask Tash to do a blessing out and Danae and also interpret? Is that okay?
Terry indicating yes.
So the reason why I'm doing that is, there's been many questions, and what we've done is just do the best that we can. Marceline or Ashanti, maybe you can send those questions over and we'll be happy to address. We're sorry we didn't get to your questions, but we're freaking happy you're all there. And on that note, Tasha, I'll yield it back to you.
Kehe Nchiriene Nahastan Hima Ani Trokonsi Kai DJ a Kehe the Haholia Ashonde a Kehe Pajona Hastling Pajona Hastling Pajona Hastling Pajona Hastling a Kehe. Thank you.
Much love, says Elena and Terry. James Wooden Legs as well. Much love to everyone. Izuko comes on and says hello and is also saying thank you. Shanti as well saying thank you. Alexa saying cheers. Terry says yes. Cheers to everyone. Hand waves. Josh says thank you, everyone.